Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Steven Olaska, and this is Norfolk Late Night. Tonight we have a real treat. Our guest for tonight is our very own Ethan Johnson from Norfolk. He'll be by to review The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Then later, I'll reveal to you what Coca-Cola can do to your body, and the latest trend in health and science. Finally, we'll end the show with a bang with some original music by Ethan. I'm your host, Steven Olaska, and this is Norfolk Late Night. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Norfolk Late Night. I'm your host, Steven Olaska, and tonight we'll be reviewing The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Joining me tonight is Ethan Johnson. Welcome to the show, Ethan.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on. How do you feel about the show so far?
It's got a nice room with great ambiance and everything.
Right. Always good to have a relaxing set. So, what are your thoughts on The Hobbit in relation to the film adaptation by Peter Jackson?
I think two things that are very important to note about The Hobbit in terms of how it was adapted are, first, the Rankin Bass cartoon version, which came out in like the 80s or 70s, something like that.
Interesting.
With the cat Smaug on it. And and then also the fact that the Peter Jackson film trilogy was not originally going to be the Peter Jackson film trilogy.
Really?
It was going to be done by Guillermo del Toro.
Interesting. So he wasn't going to be the first person to direct it then?
No, he was going to serve as sort of an advisory role. But things that you can read about the Guillermo del Toro adaptation was that they were going to stick a lot to these sort of fanciful elements that were really prominent in the book.
Right.
And especially stuff that's very fairy tale-esque. And in some ways, I think it would have benefited from that. Like, we'll talk a little bit, perhaps, about the tone later. But it also sort of serves as examining what the book itself is about. Because I remember one thing that I read was that they were originally going to have Bard, who is a very important character in like the last quarter of the book. He just shows up out of nowhere.
Indeed.
And they were going to keep that because it sort of fit within this fairy tale spirit. And I don't think that would have worked.
Okay, yeah,
but
it doesn't help the story or the plot that way.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot of elements in this which could be expanded upon that they did, and they didn't do a very good job at it.
Right. I was noticing a lot in the movie, although they had many of the main scenes down, a lot of what they did is, at certain points, they deviate very much from the main plot. Especially the iconic scene where they're trying to get to the cave to escape the thunderstorm and the giants. Whereas in the book, they're mountain giants, but in the movie, the actual mountains turn into giants, which that very much went deviated from the main plot, very much so. Another thing is, when they were being chased and hunted down and had to climb up the trees to escape the wargs and the goblins, they were never ruled over by this pale-faced orc that they bring into the movie. He's also never mentioned in the book as well. It's always...
Well, I think he's, he was the guy who killed Thorin's father, and he does so in the movie as well.
Right.
But originally when I was following the production of this film, he went through like 3 different name changes.
Interesting.
Because they had no idea of how they were going to sustain this series of 3 movies without having a central villain,
right, the whole presentation of it would have been skewed otherwise.
Yeah, because Smaug dies in, the beginning of the 3rd movie, which there are quite a few people who were very mad about that.
Right, because you see the first one, you go to see the second, you think he's going to die, and they'll wrap it up rather quickly, but it doesn't, and kind of leaves you hanging for the next one.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that go into basic storytelling elements that they wanted to emphasize, and it really didn't work out as well as it should have, especially that 3rd movie.
Indeed.
Because they stretch what is like 3 chapters into an unbelievably long drawl of a battle, which doesn't feel like they're trying to do like Minas Tirith in The Lord of the Rings.
Right. It compromises a lot of the authenticity.
Yeah, because in the book, the entire battle takes place in front of the mountain.
Yep.
And in the movie, they basically sideline the whole mountain battle. They go into the town, and then they go up into some mountain place that's important for some reason.
Right. So like the town of Dale, and where it should have been in the mountain of Erebor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. That's that very much strays from the main plot. And then I noticed the Battle of Five Armies. When Bjorn is fighting, they very much downplayed his role in the battle.
That's probably one of the best scenes in the whole book, because what happens is Bjorn comes in after the eagles come in, and then he starts fighting all gallantly and everything, and then Bilbo gets hit on the head with a rock, which is a stupid thing, but you know, it draws it to a conclusion.
Indeed,
rather quickly.
It wraps it up in a good way.
And I mean, there are some things that the adaptation did that were at least a little bit inspired.
Right. I definitely like the way that they did create Smaug on the screen. I think he was one of the best examples of a CGI dragon I've seen so
Yeah,
far.
I mean, there's been a lot of interpretations of Smaug. Like you can see on the cover here, there's this sort of serpentine version, which I would have preferred,
Right.
and instead of him like stomping through these masses of gold.
Right, because even in the book, he's described as the Great Worm as well.
And you know, Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman playing off each other is always entertaining.
Yep, it's definitely a win-win.
But him just becoming this monstrous creature rather than a devious creature who steals from people and really causes a ruckus in so many different ways. I think that was not the best of choices.
Right. Compromising some of the cunning for pure on-screen destruction.
Yeah. And especially when you also had the whole Gandalf plot.
Right.
Where he finds the necromancer who is Sauron, which in itself was sort of a retcon.
Exactly. It almost seemed to me like fanfic in a way.
Yeah.
And then there was the scene with Radagast, which he is mentioned once in the book as being Gandalf's cousin, but the whole scene with him and the hares leading away the wargs from the dwarves, that as well was never in the book.
Yeah, there's things that they could have done with Radagast to make him more interesting, and Sylvester McCoy, you know, Mr. Seventh Doctor, he was entertaining when he got to do something interesting in the role.
Right.
And that's what I think this whole thing came down to. It's the production was great, and you know, they could have created something that was really enjoyable and captured the elements that made The Hobbit such the classic that it is.
Oh, definitely. No contest there. Yep.
And they hit those times just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think Lord of the Rings was so much better an adaptation, even if it, in a technical sense, strayed more away from what the book was.
Right, because it was so easily put to screen in a way that you could not only understand it, but you could get through most of the material without having to, you know, do a bunch of research or anything like that.
Yeah.
It very much captured the pinnacle of the Minas Tirith battle. It captured the greatest moments of the bombardment of the White City by Mordor. And you're right, it definitely, even though it strays at some points, it's a lot more true to the book than it is for the Hobbit adaptation.
Right.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our next topic is Coca-Cola and what it can do to your body. We'll also be taking a look at an article from the Huffington Post for comparison. All right, I'm going to jump right into it. After you drink the Coca-Cola, 10 minutes in, 10 teaspoons of sugar hit your system, 100% of your recommended daily value. The only reason you don't immediately vomit from the overwhelming sweetness is because the phosphoric acid cuts through the flavor, allowing you to keep it down. 20 minutes in, your blood sugar spikes, causing an insulin burst. Your liver then responds by converting all the sugar it can get a hold on into fat. At the 40-minute marker, caffeine absorption is complete. Your pupils dilate, your blood pressure rises. As a response, your liver then dumps even more sugar into your bloodstream. Then the adenosine receptors are blocked, preventing any sort of drowsiness. At the 45-minute mark, your body ups your dopamine production, stimulating the pleasure centers of your brain. This is physically the same way heroin works. 60 minutes in, the phosphoric acid binds the calcium, magnesium, and zinc in your lower intestine, providing a further boost in metabolism. This is compounded by high doses of sugar and artificial sweeteners, also increasing the urinary excretion of calcium. After 60 minutes, the caffeine's diuretic properties come into play. It is now assured that you'll evacuate the bonded calcium, magnesium, and zinc that was headed to your bones, as well as the sodium and electrolytes in the water. Finally, as the rave inside of you dies down, you'll start to have a sugar crash. You may become irritable or sluggish. You've also now literally pissed away all the water that was in the Coke, but not before infusing it with the valuable nutrients your body could have used for things like having the ability to hydrate your system or even build strong bones or teeth. That was the latest trend in health and science. Is Coca-Cola bad for you? You'll have to decide for yourself. I'm your host, Steven Olaska. This is Norfolk Late Nite. Ethan, I understand you're an avid gamer. Any news in the gaming world worth sharing?
Recently, over in Europe, they've been having a Gamescom, which some people sort of describe as the EA of Europe, or the E3 of Europe, but that's not quite it. But EA did, in fact, have a big presence there through DICE, who is a Swedish-based company, I believe.
So they have a big thing going on.
Yeah, they're really big on technology, and they were showcasing stuff like Mirror's Edge 2, which seems a bit interesting.
Ah, that's cool. I don't know much about that. What does that involve?
Well, the first Mirror's Edge was a first-person platforming game. And it was based around parkour, you know, a bit like Assassin's Creed is.
Right. The whole Assassin's Creed element, and definitely parkour is, it's cool. It's definitely cool.
Yeah, and there were initially complaints when that game first came out that people got very disoriented by having this first-person perspective and rolling around on the ground, gripping onto pipes, climbing up things.
As opposed to third.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much they're actually going to fix in that regard, but I know that Mirror's Edge was very interesting because of the way that it did its levels out. Like it seemed like there was a lot of different ways to do something. In fact, there was only one way. And what they did is they colored parts that you could like grab on and jump onto red. So they have this very high contrast style where it's white and red, and you're running around this city on rooftops and everything. So
there are specific markers you need to hit in order to progress through the game then.
Yeah, and you really get this sense of feeling like you're running through and being super kinetic about everything.
Cool. It seems like it offers a pretty interesting perspective to those who want to experience that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Any other news in the gaming world worth sharing?
Actually, there's an update on a Kickstarter that I got in my email recently. There's this game series made by a Swedish dev called Divinity. And the original was sort of like a clone of Diablo. And then they started going down this RPG route. And I kickstarted the project called Divinity Original Sin, which turned out to be a fantastic game. And it's an RPG that's in the Baldur's Gate style, and you have co-op in it.
Oh, wow.
And they announced that they're doing the sequel.
That's awesome. So you got a lot of different gaming options for that sort of a thing.
Yeah. There's been a lot of revivals recently, and I think the RPG revival, especially through Kickstarter, has been basically like a thunderstorm of just successful
a whirlwind of games and possibilities.
Yeah, so like you have the one done by the Obsidian, which turned out apparently to be extremely good. Wasteland 2, and then there's Tides of Torment and Numeria, which is semi-sequel to Planescape Torment, which in itself was a great game.
Interesting. I ought to play that at some point.
Yeah. So you've got many options coming up in the near future as it comes to RPGs.
All right, everybody, that has been Tech Talk. Thanks for being on the show, Ethan.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan Johnson.
there's nothing left to suffer, where to go? I sit down and I mutter, where's my clothes? Cover up myself with old pantyhose. Whose are those? I won't give it a second thought. I will think about the things I bought. I know when there's a complication, where to go. It's just a machination weaving, so keep yourself up high and your head down low. Just a thought, but where's the road? I could have given it my all. I'm searching for a silver ball. It's just a thought, it's just a thought, it's just a thought. It's just a walk, it's just a walk, it's just a walk. It's just a scene, it's just a scene, it's just a scene. What about those in between? Where to go? I know I look like a nutter, just for show. But can you sit down and tell me where's that road? I got somewhere that I gotta go.
Good night, America. This has been Norfolk Late Night with your host, Steven Olaska. See you around town, everybody.